Let's first talk about physical threats, but because I think for a lot of organizations and for people that are watching this module, you can generally get an understanding of what can physically hit my business or my company. Wherever you're sitting right now, what's that physical threat that's going to hit you, both from an environmental and social perspective? Now, if you think about it, the top 5 global risks that have been, listed by the United Nations are extreme weather, lack of fresh water, unsustainable urbanization, urban sprawl, disease, and then the fact that our economies are locked into a fossil fuel economy. And you hear about things like what are some major threats that are out there? And what is the most urgent and growing threat to national security according to the Pentagon? Believe it or not, it's not ISIS, it's not an uprising, in the Middle East or even in the United States or terrorism. It's climate change. There's an urgent and growing threat to national security. Now you think about the Pentagon. They're not a bunch of tree hugger hippies. They're not a bunch of people that are, out there, pontificating for income inequality. They exist for a very specific mission purpose. And when they say, hey, we need to be thinking about our own resiliency and how we're going to respond to this uncertain and growing threat that's going to come from these extreme weather conditions, then that kind of means that business needs to be taking advantage of it and paying attention at the same time. How do we assess the physical threats to your organization? Well, when you're looking at it from an environmental perspective, it's a little easier. You're looking at how could extreme weather impact your facilities and your infrastructure? What impact could drought have on water? Would climate disruption change logistic routes or timing? You think about some of these different hurricanes and where it forces different routes for shipping lanes. You have ecosystems declines and what that does to increases in commodity prices. You have physical threats that might impact energy or fuel needs that could lead to more regulation. And you have changes in resource availability, which are definitely going to impact, stock market valuations. But all of those things can have some type of impact on your physical threat to your organization. For example, here's a case study where they looked at global insurance loss in the US in billions of dollars. And they looked at an average over 10 years and the average in the 30 years prior to that. And then they looked at just 2015. You see the USA had $15 billion in insured losses due to catastrophic extreme weather events. And it's almost equivalent of the previous 30 years prior to that. That gives you an idea as to why businesses need to be assessing their physical threats and where's their resiliency strategy that they're going to have as they're thinking about social and environmental issues that are coming down the pike. Increased droughts leads to forest fires during the summer, which when the forest fires happen into the winter, you have increased flooding. You might have all of that, impacts what happens with soil erosion, and you lead to massive landslides, crowd disruptions. These are all physical threats that are out there. Now, how do you assess the physical threats to your organization from a social perspective? That's a little more difficult. People tend to not grasp that as easily, because how does social unrest impact the physical aspect of your company? Well, think about when you have a mass, group of refugees that get put into an area and what that physical challenge is, the security of your facilities and your infrastructure, your employees being able to get to and from work. Social unrest can certainly lead to rioting, damaging of facilities. Can also change, the availability of your labor force. And what's going to happen with, a physical threat in terms of urbanization? What's that going to do to impact how people get to and from work? All of these things are physical threats, but from a social perspective. And so using that lens, it just takes it. Everyone can seem to understand the environmental side, but also applying a social side. What are that physical threat to your organization will help you become a more resilient business and figure out how to actually apply it in your long-term planning, in your strategies, in your thinking.